All right, let's try some examples of this more sort of advanced parallel structure issue, where the things that are in the list tend to be phrases or clauses rather than single words. So here we have another sentence. Cars on the wet highway raced by at high speed, splashed water onto the windshields of other cars, and were skidding dangerously as they changed lanes. Okay, so let's take a look at this sentence. There is a list of things in this sentence, is there not? There is a list of the things that the cars on the wet highway did. They did this, and they did this. So remember, we have a list, so we've got to make sure we put commas in the right place, right? Cars on the wet highway raced by at high speed, comma, splashed water onto the windshields of other cars, comma, and were skidding dangerously as they changed lanes. We don't put any comma after the last one in the list, particularly since, as we've studied in other lessons, this is a subordinate clause, a dependent clause, and the main clause comes first before the subordinate clause. We don't put any comma after the main clause, as we've studied in other lessons. All right, let's take a look at this list. Now remember, two things when we have parallel structure. We have to remember commas if we have three or more things in that list. If there are only two, no commas. Three or more. So the other thing is all the structures have to be parallel. They have to be the same grammatical structure. So what we're looking at here is this verb at the beginning. Raced, splashed, and were skidding dangerously. Raced, splashed, and were skidding. Well, these are both the same form of verb. They both have ed. No helping verb, right? No other verb. They're single words, not phrases. This is a verb phrase, more than one word. It has a helping verb, an auxiliary verb, and it's got ing at the end. These have ed, and that has ing. So we need to make them all the same. So the easiest thing here is to change this to match. Cars on the wet highway raced by at high speed, splashed water onto the windshields of other cars, and skidded dangerously. Take off the ing, change it to ed, take off the helping verb. All right, so that's one way, but we don't have to change this one to match these two. If we wanted, we could make them all like this. We could say, cars on the wet highway were racing by at high speed, splashing water onto the windshields of other cars, and were skidding dangerously. Cars on the highway were racing by at high speed, were splashing water onto the windshields of other cars, and were skidding dangerously. We could add were and change the ed to ing on all of them. Now, that's a bit wordy, but maybe we want to write it that way. There's nothing wrong with writing it that way. It doesn't matter which way we make them all the same, just that we make them all the same form. Okay? Grammatical form. In this case, the same kind of verb. Okay? All right. In this case, again, these are phrases because raced by at high speed is not a clause. It's a group of words with no subject and predicate. So it's just a phrase, not a clause. This is a phrase. This is a phrase. So in this case, what the items in a series, the things in a list, are these three phrases that identify what the cars on the wet highway were doing. All right, let's try a couple of shorter ones here. We have Anita was not sure whether to honk the horn swerve sharply or slam on the brakes. All right, so let's analyze this and see what we have going on. So we have a list of things here, three things that Anita was not sure whether to do, right? So she wasn't sure whether to honk the horn, whether to swerve sharply, or to slam on the brakes. So let's take a look. Those three phrases, they're phrases because they don't have subjects and predicates. They're just groups of words. So honk the horn, swerve sharply, slam on the brakes. So those are all the same form of verb. None of them has a helping verb like is or was or were or had or anything like that. None of them ends in ed or ing. So they are all the same form of verb. So we can leave them alone. This is a correctly written parallel sentence with correctly composed parallel structure. All we want to make sure we do is put the commas in the right place. Whether to honk the horn, comma, swerve sharply, comma, or slam on the brakes. Now, let me just show you something really quickly. What if I only have two things in this sentence instead of three? So we say, Anita was not sure whether to honk the horn or swerve sharply. Just two things in that list. If there are only two things, they still have to be grammatically parallel. They have to be the same kind of verb there, if that's the structure that is parallel. But we don't put a comma here. We only put a comma in between them if there are three in the list or more. Okay, I think we've got time for one more quick one. So, let's say soon it was time to pack up the instruments finishing their drinks and getting into their cars. Sorry, let me line this up for you. All right, so we have a list of things in this sentence. Three things that it was time to do, right? So soon it was time to do this, to do this, to do this. So because we have three things, more than two, three things, we have to put commas there. We're going to do this, comma, we're going to do this, comma, and we're going to do this. So we have to think about the commas if there are three or more things in the list, but we also want to make sure that these are the same form, and they're not, are they? This is pack, this one has an ing, this one has an ing. So we can fix this easily by getting rid of the ings. Now we have soon it was time to pack up the instruments finish their drinks, and get into their cars. All right? All right, now, in these examples we've looked at today, these things that are parallel are all verbs. They are not necessarily always verbs. The things that are in a list could be adjectives, they could be adverbs, they can be clauses, whole clauses with subjects and predicates, or they can be phrases, as we've seen, that start with adjectives and adverbs and things like that, not just verbs. But the examples that come up the most often on the GED or the HiSET are verbs. So that's why I focused on those. All right? Okay, thanks.